Hi guys, it's Willing Away and welcome to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park history video. I'm going to cover the overall information first, then we'll get into the history, and then we'll also get into any other cool facts that I thought were important to know about this park. So let's get into the overall info. So the Great Smoky Mountain Park is located in the southeastern U.S., and it has parts in North Carolina and Tennessee. So it's between the ridge of the Great Smoky Mountains and part of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and then both of those mountains are part of the Appalachian Mountain chain. So they're just kind of like two little sections of a really big chain. So the park contains the highest mountains in eastern North America. These are the Clingman's Dome, the Mountain Guyot, and Mount LeConte. The border between the two states runs northeast to southwest through the center of the park between North Carolina and Tennessee. And the Appalachian Trail passes through the center of the park. And that trail, the Appalachian Trail, is a really fucking big trail. A lot of people walk on it. It is a huge thing, but it is also really known to be really dangerous. It's definitely not a super safe trail, which is why you'll never catch me on it. But that trail, the Appalachian Trail, starts from Georgia and it goes up to Maine. So it's a really fucking long trail. Surprisingly, this park is the most visited park in the United States. It has, as of 2021, it had 14.1 million visitors. Which is that's crazy. Because I think Yellowstone only had 2 million. Look at the difference. What the hell? I'm not surprised. It is very accessible. It has a lot of entrances. We'll get into those. It has a lot of entrances. A lot of the roads lead to pretty good viewpoints. And entrance is free. So it is understandable why this park is visited a lot. So the park has 522,419 acres, and that makes it the largest protected area in the eastern United States. So onto your entrances, there are the main entrances, which are located in the towns of Gatlinburg, Tennessee, Cherokee, North Carolina, and Townsend, Tennessee. So the park is known for its mountains, waterfalls, biodiversity, and forests. The park is also known for its mountains, waterfalls, biodiversity, and forests. It also houses multiple historical structures that were part of communities which were occupied by early European American settlers. So the park was originally chartered by the U.S. Congress in 1934, and then it was officially dedicated by President Franklin Roosevelt in 1940. So the Great Smokies was the first park to have the land and other costs of the park paid with federal funds. Usually all the other parks we've kind of covered were funded by state money or private funds by other people. Consider Yellowstone, how for the first couple of years it was paid for by the state, kind of very little money was getting pushed into these parks. So the Great Smokies was the first park to have that land and cost of that stuff paid by the federal government. In 1983, the park was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and in 1988, it was made an International Biosphere Reserve. And due to the park being the most visited park, the surrounding town of Sevier County in Tennessee has some really popular tourist attractions. That includes Dollywood, Ober-Gatlinburg, and Ripley's Aquarium of the Smokies. Those are kind of some of the popular attractions, but it definitely, the town has benefited, which is what we're going to get into. So tourism to the park has contributed $2.5 billion annually to the local economy. So they get supported up there quite a bit due to the park and all the other tourist attractions and stuff. That is all we have for our overall information, just kind of the easy stuff to know. We're going to get into the history, which is a little bit longer, but it's definitely not as long as Yellowstone's history. But So for thousands of years, this region was occupied by successive cults of indigenous peoples, and the historic Cherokee's homeland was in the region, and it occupied numerous towns in the valleys on both sides of the Appalachian Mountains. Their first encounters with Europeans were as traders, which mainly came from the colonial Carolinas and your Virginia. European Americans did not begin to settle there until the late 18th and early 19th centuries, and in 1830, if you learn about this in your history class, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, which began the process of forced removal of all Native American tribes east of the Mississippi River to what would now be, to us, Oklahoma. So most of the Cherokee were removed forcibly. However, for some period of time, some of the Cherokee, led by such warriors as Sali, were able to evade removal by staying in the area, which is now the park. So a tribe on the Oconaluftee, I believe, river, acquired the land and remained. So they bought land, they got it, and then they remained there. So their descendants make up most of the federally recognized Eastern Band of Cherokee Natives, which are based in Cherokee, North Carolina, and their Koala Boundary Reserve to the south of the park. So John Mingus, who would eventually build Mingus Mill, which is in the park, and Ralph Hughes settled on the Oconaluftee in 1795. Others soon followed, and they would begin to start clearing the land and farming on the land. So in 1818, John Oliver and his family were the first white settlers to move into Cades Cove, and then eventually, after 1821, more families would start to settle in Cades Cove, and those would include Jobs, Gregory's, Sparks, and Cables. And in 1827, the Cades Cove Baptist Church would be built. As people settled, entrepreneurs developed logging as a very major industry in the mountains, and the Little River Railroad was constructed by W.B. Townsend in the late 19th century to help move those timber out of the area. So Colonial Townsend had purchased 86,000 acres of land on the Little River, and because of this, many other construction companies and other logging companies would soon follow and start also buying land. That would include your Ritter Lumber Company, Monteval Timber Company, and Norwood Lumber. Eventually, a logging company called Champion would purchase 92,000 acres of land, which would include the Greenbrier Cover, Klingman's Dome, and Mount Kephart. This is shocking. By 1909, logging, considering we had a ton of companies start to take up this land, was at its peak, and 2/3 of the whole entire park was either logged or was almost burned down due to logging accidents. Because the logging was destroying the natural beauty of the area, and, people like that area, many locals and visitors who had been around there in the 20th century decided to team together and raise money to preserve the land. So at this time, the National Park Service wanted a park in the eastern region of the United States, but they didn't have any of the funds to establish one, so they hired David C. Chapman, who lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, and was a business leader, to establish a national park in the area in 1925. Eventually, Congress approved the park in 1926, but there was no federal money at the time to help develop the park, so John D. Rockefeller Jr. contributed $5 million to the park, and the U.S. government gave $2 million to the park. Also at the time, locals and other citizens around Tennessee and North Carolina also pitched in to help develop the park, but it was very much piece by piece. They weren't able to dump $5 million like John D. Rockefeller Jr. So eventually, all the mountain homesteaders, miners, loggers were evicted from the land, considering it was going to be turned into a protected area. And also along with that were the logging and farming operations were also kicked out because it was getting ready to be protected, so they needed everyone to get out. Travel writer Horace Kephart, from which Mount Kephart is named after, and photographers Jim Thompson and George Massa were instrumental in developing the park. And Ben W. Hooper was the principal land purchasing agent, which was established on June 15th, 1934. So he was in charge of purchasing land, more land for the park. We run into, yet again, the CCC, which is the Civilian Conservation Corps, and the WPA, which is the Works Progress Administration. Those people and some other federal organizations, they would hire workers to help build your trails, your fire watch towers, and any other improvements to the park, like they kind of did with Yellowstone, and I believe they also helped in Big Bend. So they're definitely around the area. I feel like we're going to run into the CCC and the WPA yet again soon in another park. But they tend to be around parks. They help kind of get the first trails built and that kind of stuff. So that is our history. That is where it ends. Now we're going to get into the geology, which is, I thought was kind of interesting. Yet again, I'm not a geologist, so some of the stuff that I say is going to sound really scientific. Just know I had to research that stuff, and it was very confusing. So the majority of the rocks in the park are what are labeled as late Precambrian, and those rocks are also part of a subgroup of that area, or of those late Precambrian, that are called the Oki. This group consists of metamorphosed sandstones, phyalites, schists, and slate. These rocks are considered the oldest rock in the park, but they aren't just the oldest. They are also seen in the Raven Fork Valley, Upper Tuscany River, which is between Cherokee and Bryson City. Those rocks consist of gneisses, granite, and schist. Cambrian sediment rocks can be found at the bottom of the foothills in the northwest and in limestone coves such as your Cades Cove. Cades Cove is actually one of the most visited features of the park. So Cades Cove is a window or an area where older rocks made out of sandstone surround the valley floor of younger rocks made out of limestone. Very fucking confusing, but that is what it's labeled as, that is what it's known as. The Precambrian rocks, like the gneisses and schists, were formed from the accumulation of marine sediments and indigenous rocks. Basically, this is how I understood it. It was a lot of scientific words, but you're going to get a little bit of a synopsis through me. These rocks were made so long ago that throughout the years they got covered up by other rocks and other stuff. And eventually, during the Mesozoic era, rapid erosion occurred, which re-exposed the older Oki supergroup formations, and that is how we were able to see them. So that is all I have for geology. We are going to get into the environment, which I really liked. So the park's elevation ranges from 875 feet at the lowest to 6,643 feet at the highest, which the highest point is at the summit of Klingman's Dome. So the park has a total of 16 mountains, which are labeled that they reach higher than 5,000 feet in elevation. So ascending these mountains is compared... This fucking blew my mind. Oh my god, okay. So I read this, and I had to take a double take for a minute. Ascending the mountains is comparable to a trip from Tennessee to Canada. That's wild. So plants and animals, which are found in the northeast, so your kind of like native plants, have found places to grow in higher elevations, very specific areas, but they have found places to grow in higher elevations due to that they can like withstand the cold easier. However, your plants that are found more south, like your more south native plants, tend to live in like the lower areas of the park, considering that they cannot handle the cold as easily as other plants. So the climate of the Great Smoky Mountains, it has two types of climates. It has humid subtropical and temperate oceanic. The humid subtropical air produces large amounts of precipitation, which is just rain. Annual rain ranges from 50 to 80 inches, and usually the park has heavy snowfall in the winters at higher up elevations. So it'll still snow, but it's definitely the more higher you go, the heavier the snow is going to be. So flash flooding usually occurs after heavy rain, and I thought this was cool. Strong winds of 80 to 100 miles per hour occur only a few times each year around the mountains, usually during October to April, and these winds are called your mountain waves. I saw a little graph while I was reading this to kind of demonstrate it. Basically, think of it like this. The wind goes over the top of the mountain, and it goes down into, like, the valley of the mountain, and then back up over, like, another mountain or something like that. It is that's kind of how I understood it. It's like a mountain wave. It kind of, like, goes over and under. But these damaging winds can generate strong thunderstorms and sometimes even tornadoes. This is another thing I wanted to cover, which is the air pollution in the park. The Great Smoky Mountains had a real big problem with air pollution due to increased development. It was labeled in 2004 by the NPCA, so the National Parks Conservation Association, that the park was the most polluted park. That the Great Smoky Mountains was the most polluted. And from 1999 to 2003, the park had 150 unhealthy air days, which means you really should not be going outside in the park on those days. So it's kind of like that's not good. And if I remember reading at one place, that basically from 1990 to 2003, the 150 air days, basically means that for one whole month of every single year, the park had a whole month of unhealthy air days. Which is crazy to think, but it did happen. Thankfully, though, in 2013, Colorado State University reported that due to the United States Clean Air Act in the 1970s, that the park has significantly improved from the 1990 to 2010. So it's getting better, thankfully. So it shouldn't be as polluted as it was, but it is slowly getting better, slowly picking itself up from what happened, all the pollution due to all the development, that kind of stuff. Now we get into a section that is combined, considering there's only a small bit of each, is your biology and your ecology. I just combined these two, considering that they're like, the sections would have been really small if I hadn't combined them. So we're just going to go through these together, and yeah, that's about it. So the park is 95% forested, and almost 36% of it is considered to be old growth forests, which means that they predate European settlement time. So they are older than when Europeans settled in the parks. So it is one of the largest areas of deciduous temperate old growth forests in North America. And the park has about 19,000 species of organisms which are known to live in the park, have been verified that they are in the park, but it is believed that there are 100,000 undocumented species that could be present, that they just haven't seen yet. So there are more than 200 species of bird, 50 species of fish, 39 species of reptiles, and 43 species of amphibians, which include your lungless salamanders. The park is a very good place for salamanders. It is kind of where they thrive. That is why they have so many species of salamander in the park. Along with that, the park has 1,500, there you go, black bears. In an attempt to reintroduce red wolves into the park in 1991, it failed so drastically trying to reintroduce these wolves that the U.S. Fish and Game, which are kind of like your police officers for nature, had to remove every single fucking wolf from that area in 1998. I don't know exactly what happened. It did not tell me while I was researching, but apparently it failed so badly that every single wolf had to be removed. However, elk were reintroduced in 2001 and are most abundant in the Cataloochee area. Because, I mean, due to the fact that there are no more wolves in the park, I think that helped contribute to them being able to grow abundant in the park due to not having too many predators. So the park is home to your raccoons, bobcats, fox, river otter, woodchuck, beaver, squirrels, possum, white-tailed deer, chipmunks, skunks, and bats. I read that they have like multiple different species of bats, along with 2 different species of foxes. So they do have quite a bit of diversity in those parks. So the park has 100 species of trees, and in addition with that, it has 1,400 flowering plant species. So these are your flowers. They basically, in springtime, they'll flower and then they'll close again. However, they have 4,000 species of non-flowering plants. So speaking of fish, apparently they had a nice list of exactly some of the most popular fish species, so I thought I would read them out. They have the American gizzard shad, Lamotra appendix, longnose gar, mountain brook lamprey, and brook trout are some of the popular ones. And that is where we end off for your biology and your ecology. Those are kind of all the animals we'll see and all of the plants you'll see. Now we get into the biggest section of this, which is your attractions and activities. The Great Smoky Mountains is known for their activities. I'll say that. I saw this section and I was like, I don't want to research this. It is going to take forever. I did a little bit. But we're here now, so huzzah. So the park has 2 main visitor centers, which are inside the park. They are located at Sugarland's Visitor Center, which is near the Gatlinburg entrance, and the Okonalufte Visitor Center, which is near Cherokee, North Carolina. So they have 2 main visitor areas. In these areas, though, the center provides exhibits on your wildlife, your geology, history of the park, sorry. They also sell books and maps and souvenirs. However, the entrance to the park is free, like I stated earlier. U.S. Highway 441 bisects the park, and that highway provides very easy access to many different trailheads and overlooks. Most notably, it gives access to the Newfound Gap overlook. So the Newfound Gap is at an elevation of 5,048 feet, and is actually considered the lowest gap of the mountains. It was here at the Newfound Gap that in 1940 Franklin Roosevelt dedicated the national park. On clear days, the Gap has arguably, like some people argue, that the Gap has the most spectacular views that can be accessed by highway. So out of all the overlooks, the ones that can be accessed by highway, Newfound Gap has the most spectacular views. Lakeview Drive, which is located along the north shore of Fontana Lake, is considered an unfinished scenic road, which I thought was surprising, honestly. It features an unused road tunnel and connects to various different hiking and horseback riding trails. The park has many historical attractions. We'll get into a long list of those. Some of them being Cades Cove, which has like log cabins, barns, and churches. Other historical areas include Roaring Fork, Cataloochee, Elkmont, and the Mountain Farm Museum, along with Mingus Mill on Okonalufute River. So those are kind of your basic activities. We get into hiking, which this park is known for hiking. Like, it has a lot of trails. It has actually 850 miles of trails and unpaved roads in the park for hiking, which includes 70 miles of the Appalachian Trail. Yet again, you'll never catch me on that trail. I've heard too many horror stories, dude. I could not walk the Appalachian Trail. Maule Conte is the most frequented destination in the park. It is the 3rd largest summit in the park, which is measured from the base to the highest peak. And fun fact, hikers can actually spend a night at the LeConte Lodge, but it is accessible only by trail, and it is only private lodging available. Another popular hike is the Chimney Tops. However, it was considered the flashpoint for the 2016 fires. So damage still is seen there today. If you don't know, 2016 had really bad fires. I believe we'll get into them towards the end, but they had really bad fires and they were really destructive. And so you can still kind of see the damage still there today. Both the Laurel Falls and Clingman's Dome trails are relatively easy trails, and the Laurel Falls trails leads to a very powerful waterfall, while the Clingman's Dome trail leads to an observation deck. In addition to hiking, the park also allows backpacking and camping in various certain areas. Designated backcountry campsites are scattered throughout the park. However, a permit is required for all the camping areas, along with reservations to some of them. You will have to reserve your night there, and then you get, I believe, only a day to stay there, and then you have to continue on. Other activities in the park that are popular, so fishing, specifically fly fishing, is the most popular activity in the park. The park is known to have very healthy trout activity, and brook trout, which were native to the water, are there, while both brown and rainbow were introduced into the park. And because of recent droughts at the time, killing off some of the fish species, there have been strict regulations put on fishing to help hopefully bring those fish populations back. There have been some regulations that are added on to make sure that those species stay safe and can grow back. So horseback riding is offered by the park, and along with bicycling and water tubing can all be accessed inside the park. Now we move on to the historic areas. I said we get into a longer list of them. We're definitely going to get into a longer list. So some more historic areas in the park include your historic districts. So these are areas that are considered historic. Those are your Cade Cove, Elkmont, Okanagan-Lafute Archaeological District, Noah Ugal Place, and Roaring Fork. Individual places which are considered historic are your Alex Cole Cabin, Clingman's Dome Observation Tower, Hall Cabin, John Messer Barn, John Oben Cabin, Okanagan-Lafute Baptist Church, Tyson McCarter Place, Mayana Trenor Avant Studio, Little Greenbrier School, and Walker Sisters Place are considered individual places that are considered historic. So the cultural importance of this park, what has kind of, happened around the park. I saw somewhere that if fucking Disney filmed the movie in there, it was in the cultural importance, it was in there, and I was like, what? Why are we talking about Disney? Where did Disney come from? So apparently they did film one of their movies in the park, or something like that was located in the park for Disney. Did I care to read more? No. I'm not a huge Disney fan. So I read that and I was like, oh god, it follows me everywhere. Anyways, the park was designated, like I said, an International Biosphere Reserve in 1976 and was certified a UNESCO, that, I stumble upon that shit all the time, UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1983, and it also became a part of something called the Southern Appalachian Biosphere Reserve in 1988. Like I said, I was going to bring up the wildfires. This is the part of it. So in late November and early December of 2016, a series of wildfires engulfed a total of 17,900 acres. The fires ended up killing 14 people and injured 190. This forced an evacuation of more than 14,000 people. The wildfires were considered the deadliest since the Great Fires of 1947 and compromised one of the worst natural disasters in the history of Tennessee. On a lighter note, in 2015, Cassius Cash was appointed the first African-American superintendent of the Great Smoky Mountains, and he is also the 16th superintendent. And I thought we'd leave off on that happy note. So that is all I had to cover the Great Smoky Mountains. As of right now, I don't think I have an idea for the next part. However, one is there. I think I know where we're going to go next. We're going back to a canyon. I think that's how it's going to work. But yeah, so I will see you guys in the next one, which should be this Friday. We'll be covering personally, I think it'll be a fun one. Or we're going back to a canyon, though, so be prepared for hot weather. But yeah, so I will see you guys later. And I don't say this often, but if you guys did like this, if you like me, reading off the history, giving you guys some facts about the parks, please like and subscribe. It helps a lot. And I will see you guys in the next one. Until our next adventure, may your trails be filled with wanderlust, and I will see y'all in the parks. Goodbye!